You ready for part 2?
Let's do it. Part 1, we came in and leveled out the speakers because we were having that imbalance from left to right. We also matched the focals and the NS10s so that way they would be even when switching back and forth. And we messed with the sub a little bit because level-wise and crossover-wise, it was no bueno. Tweaked all of that stuff, and then after we kind of felt like everything was semi-okay, we went through the educational experience of doing a frequency sweep, and we found out the gloriousness of the null of your room.
Is that a 20 dB dip?
And that was on the focals.
Yes, we did not shoot anything on the NS10s because we just wanted to see what more of a full range sound was going through the focals. We ended up finding out about a massive dip that we were getting at around 120, and then seeing the harmonics as it carried through below to 60 as well as going up the chain. We also noticed the phase issue that the sub was causing because we shot it with and without the sub, and we noticed with your sub turned on, we were getting this weird phase in the top end. We tweaked a little bit on that to where it seemed to be happy, but that's kind of where we left it for the day, knowing where things were at, but also knowing it was sounding better than when we came in at the start of the day.
After that experience, I did a session here and went back to my old habits and discovered, like, oh yeah, I like the NS10s on the desk, which speakers on the desk can create reflection issues, resonance, stuff like that. But you know, that's how I work. That's how I get the results that I understand and that work for me. I don't know why. So I thought maybe today, let's run a same frequency sweep, but on the NS10s on the desk. Also, like when I'm getting sounds, tracking, and when I'm mixing, I'm actually not mixing 100% on the focals. I do a lot of it on the NS10s and like usually at pretty low volumes for a large percentage of the time. And I use the sub. So it'll be interesting to see how that phase and the levels and all that happen.
So we're going to plug the mic back in and do the sweeps again.
So when we did it last time, we just were kind of quickly messing with it and wanted to just shoot and see where we were starting from. So doing this time, we'll throw a packing blanket over it so that you don't get what's known as console bounce. Because of the way the microphone is and the way your ears are, it definitely gets more of a reflection when using the mic as opposed to the way you're normally listening. So tossing that up top, that way we'll clean up a lot of that stuff that we get doing measurements, and then we'll see where we start with and change from there.
This is test 1.
Yep.
With sub. I have no idea what I'm seeing.
Unsmooth raw data. So let's go ahead and do another one. Sub mute. So if anybody's going to do this, one of the things I will recommend is always label after you do a measurement, because you will forget what you just did really quickly.
Oh yeah. What technically is happening between the raw data and the smoothing?
Okay, so smoothing, what we're doing is you're making it more of what the human ear is actually perceiving it as.
Okay.
When there's no smoothing at all, that literally is just raw data that the microphone's capturing, and you see a whole lot of peaks and everything, and your ear actually naturally will smooth things out and make the data more comprehensive to how you're actually hearing. You can apply the smoothing based upon how deep you want to get. If I get really super technical and trying to really clean up a room, then I will work at like a 1/24 smoothing, because then you'll see a lot of differentiations in the curve. But for this scenario where we're kind of just getting an idea of where the NS10s are at for starters, I'll look more at like a 1/6, because that's kind of already cleaning up a lot of the stuff, and it's kind of a little bit closer to what your ear is perceiving in just natural listening. Okay, so this is your low frequency. So this is essentially where everything drops off. You're getting room resonance, obviously, because those speakers aren't pulling as much. But here's where we're seeing that same sort of null that we were seeing before. So that's at 80 hertz. Because if you look, here's kind of your average of where things are at, and it starts to fall down. So here's at 60. We go about another 20 hertz up. There's at 86. So that's kind of where we were noting stuff before in your room.
Yep.
This right here, this 10K, I think this is the same thing we were noticing with the sub. This was kind of causing this weird phase issue where it was pulling. Let's go ahead and smooth this out. And if we lay them on top of each other, No, not as much with the NS10s as much as we saw with the Focals, but still a little bit of shift there. But that's not a huge issue. So these two that you're seeing here, the green is without the sub, the red is with the sub. So here's how you're seeing the actual NS10s without that low frequency extension.
Okay.
You're seeing that we're pretty even to about 130, and then it starts to fall off even more with the green. And then now right here is where it definitely gets the big break. So that's at about 90 hertz. All of the low frequency of the NS10s drops off pretty drastically, where the sub is now carrying it through here.
Yep.
So that's okay. I'm just looking to see with and without the sub, how much interaction is the sub actually giving me and how much it's affecting it. Now, if you want to see some other things that this can do, just so that way for your reference, if we look at the RT60 of your room, because this is where you'll actually see how you want things to dissipate evenly. What you see here is a lot of the high end is all dissipating at the same time. So that's what makes your top end feel smooth. Now the bottom, this is where you get a lot of the funkiness. So what you want to see is everything kind of cascading similarly. But here you're seeing that you're definitely getting a lot more buildup. And this is at about 180 and so forth. But it starts at 320. And that's where you see that that's definitely holding a lot more. When we listened in your room, the biggest things that were stepping out was just your low mids and how much they were just holding in the room, holding in the space. And that's where you'll see this sort of data right here as the waterfall cascades. Here's the NS10s with the sub. So I'll have that generate, and you'll see your bottom end sustain even longer. So see how that data is holding there, where if I go back to here, there's a fall off. That's your big difference. So with the sub in, you actually are getting more cleaned up in this region of frequency, which is around 300 to 220. That's actually remaining a very similar decay, but then when you take the sub out, that information sits a little bit longer. So we're definitely getting a little bit of cancelization the way that the sub is working with those. We talked briefly about possibly turning your sub, so that way instead of having it firing there, let's just rotate it 90 degrees. What are you crunching on over there?
You asked.
I did. Wow. And check. That cleared up this.
Whoa.
All right, so we rotated the sub 90 degrees, so it's shooting this way. And we saw a phase correction, right?
Yep. So
in the 10K area here.
So what we saw with the blue line here is all of this stuff that was starting to get canceled out now is remaining in the right space, and this large dip that hits right at about 10K is now gone. So we're going to look at the phase rotation of the sub to then see if we can get this to clear up completely.
And that's the orange one?
Yes.
So it actually brought it up.
Yeah. So that
positive, right?
Yeah. So looking at this, the phase rotation, so we rotated the phase and it brought this back further. The blue is actually where we had it brought up more, but our top end is that's where we're seeing this huge fluctuation. What we don't want is this. The red one is where you're going to be second guessing all of your sibilants, all of where your snare crack is, everything that you're going to be sitting in this top end region.
Where I'm cranking the Pultec at 10K.
Yes.
Now we are just tweaking for those not following.
With the phases of the sub.
There's a little knob on the back of this that allows you to rotate the phase.
Yeah, so it can go from 0 to 180. We were starting at about 70, and just to get some context, I moved it to 0. I just turned it all the way to 180 just to see our streams, because I wanted to see how much of a shift I was getting if I went 100%.
Cool.
Is this where we listen to John Mayer again?
Yes. So we're looking at the low end. Just to recap, we have rotated the sub.
We rotated
90
the sub 90
degrees.
degrees physically, but we also rotated the phase. We started at 70 and we rotated it to 90.
To 90, okay.
Yes. So we've got a 90 degree phase rotation with a physical turning the driver 90 degrees, so it's side firing.
Yep.
So with that, now here's our readout of the low end. Last video you heard that 20 dB drop. So now there is still these two notches in there at 60 and 85, but it's only a 5 dB bump. It's not as drastic of an issue.
That's way better.
And if we look at the whole readout, yes, this is still some funkiness here, which is at That's at 2 and 3. So there's a little bit of
2
some
and-
stuff in the room.
A lot of 2 and not a lot of 3.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, but that's in the high mids. That's 2K and 3K.
2K
Okay.
and 3K.
Yeah.
But then this top end, what we noticed when we first started, if I turn that back on, that's your top end when we first started the day.
Whoa.
This was at 10K, bringing all the way down to 75
Yep.
SPL.
Yep.
Now, which is rotating in that couple things, this is reading out where it should.
Much
We're
more
getting
even,
it
yeah.
a little bit. There is fluctuations, and that's expected.
Yeah.
This at least is more linear to work with.
Yeah, and again, these are like, that's maybe what you would kind of expect from a speaker like this,
Correct.
right?
Yeah. I mean, even with this sort of, this sort of fluctuation.
Madness.
Yeah, I would expect that, because what we're looking at as well is this crossover point between the woofer and here.
Yeah.
Where is that actually set? And when that happens, you do get some sort of fluctuations in SPL as well as phase. When we listen back, it's not enough to where we were hearing problems.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
what we noticed more when we listened back after doing this was you heard a lot of clarity up here and
Yeah.
not a much of the air and hype that you were getting before.
Yeah.
Even as well, your low end, you were noticing that, hey, this is brought up and this is
Yep.
brought down. So the low end seems more even.
And that's incredible that all those changes came from just the sub orientation and the phase setting on there.
Rotating the sub physically and then changing the phase rotation is what was affecting your response to these speakers.
How like insane can you get with like, okay, let's do this 50 more times? Like,
I mean, depending upon what speakers and what hardware you have.
yeah.
I mean, when I did this at JTL and Studio A, when they put in the SSL with the Dutch and Dutch speakers, we measured each speaker independently at 7 locations across the desk.
Oh my God.
So that way each speaker has its own EQ profile.
Yeah.
So it's correcting whatever reflections each one is having. And then from there, we measured again the speakers together post individual filtering.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did our own, set of shelving to taste for Jared's liking.
That's
Total
crazy.
amount of measurements that we
Yeah.
did in that room, 714. I think by the time we were done, I think I had 33 measurements.
Woo!
So, but it's,
All right.
like we would do it is you measure the spot, move 18 inches to the left, move another one, move to the right, the same measurements.
Well, yeah, 'cause especially on a, you're moving around a lot.
Exactly, because it's a full desk, and
Yeah.
that's a wider speaker setup in that room as well. We'll definitely do that to more of an nth degree, where with this, where we don't have any EQ in play or any
Yeah.
filtering, we're literally just working with the physics of the room and the location of speakers.
Yep.
And you're noticing how by moving something physically and shifting a little bit of phase, how much it actually is affecting the response of the room, and in the end, your listening position and your decision making when you're mixing and even tracking.
To be quite honest, I'm actually happy with just this
Cool.
amount of improvement. I've been able to get what I wanted out of the room to a surprising degree with the flaws that it had.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in hindsight, I do spend most of my time on these.
Yeah.
So when we did the test on that and it was crazy, I was like, how have I... Well, I'm not generally doing full mixes on the vocals,
Yeah.
so that makes sense. The fact that it now is going to be an even more accurate and likely pleasant experience using these, I'm pumped. And they're placed where I want them. It was nice having them on stands because of the sort of the imaging consistency and having them off the desk. The desk looks cool and all that, but I want them close.
Well, that, and also you were saying you have the volume lower when mixing with them closer.
Yeah.
And that's pretty common that you've seen working in studios with other mixers and myself as well. When they're kind of in mix mode and everybody is out of the room and it's more kind of that really nitpicky decision-making things on each individual micro level of the track, they're not working at 90 decibels for 8 hours a day. It's more like, hey, my speakers are set on 70, 75 and I'm listening quiet and just really fine tuning in, and your ears then at that point are just open really wide. If you got SPL cranking, the actual movements of your ear will start to close off and the little minor details are getting lost.
Yep.
So working with these close like this and then now fixing this EQ, you're now able to work and make decisions in a much more effective manner. I think this is a good starting point with the fact of, we could start turning the sub another way and have it a different direction. What I'm seeing right now is pretty decent. That fall off that you're seeing on the top end doesn't necessarily make me freak out as much because of the construction of these speakers.
This is this is 13K here. Whoops,
Yes.
13K. So like it makes sense with that particular type of speaker.
Correct. Really, the focus in the mix that a lot of people always look at is make sure your mid-range is right.
Yep.
And if that's right, the rest of it is all just kind of filled in and get you the air to get your spaces or get you your sub. But your mid-range, if that's right and tight, then everybody's set. Cool.
How do you end a video like this?
Well, closing thoughts that I would say is let's live with it, work on some stuff for a week, see how you feel. And if you're noticing like, hey, I'm making decisions and I'm doing car tests or I'm sending it out to other people and you're hearing responses back, then we know that we're pretty set and right. And then from there, we can kind of fine tune. If we need to revisit this again and maybe you're saying, hey, I want to widen the speakers out a little bit, okay, then we can check this again and kind of mess with it. It's really about finding where am I making my best results in the room. You know, we can throw in a stereo parametric EQ and start futzing with that around. But in the end, with how these speakers are constructed, I don't really know if there's much more we can do or that we should do. I think at this point, it's more on the user operator of the space to make sure that they feel confident and comfortable to start to put out content that they know is the way that they intended it to be sent out.
For those who are wondering, these are the Aventone CLA 10s, and this is a mod I did. This is called gaff tape, and there's a really hideous logo underneath here, and you can fix it by just putting some black gaff tape over it, and I actually think it made the speakers sound better, personally.
I think they did too. I think this blanket is also, I think you should mix like this all the time now.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it does give me like a safety, comforting feeling.
I mean, we pulled that off. I think we got to listen again. You know, we need to do
That's
more
true.
John Mayer.
That's
what
true.
we need.
All right, leave comments, likes, go follow Brian. I'll see you guys in the next one. Okay, just for funsies, we just did the focal test again. We're looking at our low end. This is 90 something hertz.
Yeah, it's 97 hertz.
Okay, so the yellow line is with the NS10s, and then the teal is the focals. We get that giant dip when we flip out to the big speakers here, but it's pretty good on the NS10s, which is potentially why I prefer to use them and not understand.
Yeah, but what you notice is also that top end, because of the tweeter on the focals, that's way the heck up there.
Oh yeah. Fascinating.